Good day everyone. One of the most misunderstood constellations in Genshin Impact is the Raiden Shogun C6. This constellation allows you to reduce the elemental burst cooldown timer for the rest of your party members' elemental burst, and this means that you can just use your burst a lot quicker, effectively short-circuiting your rotation. So a good example here is I've got my Yelan's burst back up precisely when I needed to take care of the enemies and get a good clearing time. So let's discuss this in a bit of detail. Now, a lot of people might say that stopping at C3 is the ideal for Raiden Shogun because you're going to play her as a hyper carry, but I do feel that with the way in which her kit is designed, she definitely is not a hyper carry in terms of her power budget. She has supportive capabilities, and these are very often overlooked by a lot of players. So as an example, on your way to C6 you can get a C4, which gives you a 30% attack percentage bonus, and this means that if you get to C6 you can reduce your party's elemental burst cost, you give your parties more attack, you give them more elemental burst damage bonus, and you can restore their energy effectively by building the Raiden Shogun with ER. You can see there it's part of her Enlightened 1 passive talent. So what this really means in practice is that Raiden should probably be played as a dual carry in a lot of teams, let's say with Yaemiko, or the one that I showed with Raiden, with Yelan herself. Now, a lot of people will object to this and say, but hey, I saw this Billy speedrun with Xiangling and Chevres, and basically the guy used a C3 R1 Raiden Shogun and they beat this also in 24 seconds using the book trick. Yeah, I get it. There are different ways of playing with the Shogun, and really not to diminish what other players are doing, but unfortunately strats like using Raiden as a hyper carry are fraught with the fact that it's not always going to be a good consistent strategy. It's not always going to work on a lot of the other floors, whereas something like using her C6 will give you more consistent results when you play her outside of just being the sole carry for the team. You can see here already in the background, giving you a couple of examples, where even if you do the book trick correctly or if you do it incorrectly, you're going to have a lot of retries and doing the things over and over again before you just get that sweet spot in terms of clearing. So you can see here, I did the book trick, got the damage, but I missed a couple of crits, the enemy flew up, so unfortunately, you're going to have to reset, and that to me just goes against the fun of Genshin Impact. Now, not to diminish the efforts that people put into speedrunning and all the amounts of hours of retrying that they don't show you, but what I find is that being able to clear things consistently just makes the game more fun. So I have about 24 clears on my hard drive against PMA, all under 25 seconds, using this team within an hour. Literally, that is how consistent these runs are. Now, at this point, a lot of people might be very skeptical and say, well, there's a good reason everyone stops at C2, C3 Raiden, and that's because it works. We've seen the Billy speedruns, the Chinese players have definitely shown that's the fastest way to beat the content, and I get it. It's, from my perspective, that's perfectly fine, but it's exactly the problem. The only content we have to showcase these characters are like this Abyss floor. The only meaningful thing to do here and to optimize for is to beat the clock as fast as possible. If we go into something like the recent Fontaine event, the entire goal here is to get a high enough score. In other words, it's not about beating the clock as fast as possible, but by doing the most amount of things that you can with your allotted time. This is a very different way of playing the game. It's something that's entirely different in terms of optimizing for. So, for example, as you can see in the background, as I use my abilities and so on, and new enemies and mobs appear, I still have characters that are on cooldown. But if I go to, let's say, something like the Spiral Abyss and I beat up the PMA, it doesn't matter if I've got, let's say, still 10 seconds on my Yelan's E ability, or let's say Farina's elemental skill is on cooldown, because none of that really matters. What matters in the Spiral Abyss context is that I beat the first wave, I go on to the second wave, and by the time I get to the next chamber or chamber 2 first half, all of my abilities are effectively reset, of course obviously barring the elemental burst energy. This means that in certain types of content, when you have to restart a rotation with all of your abilities, you'll get an advantage, whereas in a case like this, everything is hot. In other words, the entire rotation, the next rotation, is dependent on what you did in the previous rotation to a far greater degree, and this just means that certain team types will have a benefit, whereas others won't. And this is precisely why I said that Raiden Shogun's Constellation 6 is so misunderstood, and it's misunderstood because you can't really get the full benefit and potential in something like the Spiral Abyss, whereas in content like this, you do get that full benefit. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. From my perspective, I like this combat event way more. It allows me to properly play with my characters, it allows me to fully enjoy their rotations, to test different teams, and to ultimately discover some new things that you don't always get through speedrunning the Spiral Abyss, and that's just what I enjoy. In any case, let me know what you guys thought of this, what you think of the Raiden C6, and have a lovely day. Cheers.